Hello, welcome to Face to Face. My name is Adam Jasser. My regular sparring partner on this show, TVP World Editor-in-Chief Michał Broniatowski, could not join us today, but we have a worthy replacement, our Europe editor, Marcin Zaborowski. Marcin, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Marcin, this was a week, quite a week. To paraphrase President Donald Trump, he's never tired of wreaking havoc on the world. This week, he hiked U.S. tariffs to levels unseen since the Great Depression almost a century ago. We can take a look at what he showed the world. So, we know how it ended then, back during the Great Depression, 100 years ago. It was economic misery in Europe. It was prolonged economic misery also in the United States, and followed by the Second World War. So are we going in for a replay?
Well, hopefully no. I think that still the situation today, the geoeconomic situation is very, very different than 100 years ago. I think when the economic crisis hit in 1929, when the Wall Street had all these losses that were followed by recession, that was the world economy was fundamentally different in a sense, not just of economic advance and so on, but there was a much lower input of state in economy. There was far less regulation. There was far less predictability. The Wall Street was really a Ponzi scheme with very little safeguards and so on.
Yeah, I know, but on the other hand, the level of integration of the global economy back then was much lower than it is today. Today, it's much more integrated. So any disruption can be potentially more problematic.
But we already went through that. In 2008, we had a very substantial economic crisis that had the potential to repeat in 1929. I mean, it was miserable, it was bad, we had recession, but, you know, frankly, we survived. And many of us unscathed.
Yes, so, but the difference is that back then, Europe and the United States coordinated their response to the crisis. The G7 group, so the biggest economies, the central banks. Today, Mr. Trump seems to be rather against any kind of coordination.
Yeah, this is a big difference. A big difference between 2008 and today is that in 2008, as you said yourself, we had a transatlantic unity. Today, we have for the first time the situation since the end of the Second World War that the United States is essentially turning against the system that it created. And that is new and, frankly speaking, rather unpredictable, because much will depend on how we and the other countries will respond to the American hikes in tariffs. Whether we are entering the trade war or whether we will wait and see.
Yes, and whether this is a negotiating tactic on the part of Donald Trump. The way President Trump presented these tariffs to the American people seemed quite convincing, this table and, big numbers. And I think, it underlined his claim that America was being ripped off by the world. But very quickly, analysts, economists, and politicians around the world looked at these numbers and said, no, they're fake. Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, basically what the numbers are, they based on the deficit that the United States had in manufacturing sector, by the way, only, with these states. And then it was being seen against the overall trade. And so they estimated that the trade imbalance and trade deficit with Europe is 39%. Half of that will be 20%, and hence we have 20% of tariffs being imposed.
So calculations on the back of an envelope.
Completely.
Right. Okay. So how does it fit into the wider pattern of America under Donald Trump demolishing basically the world order that America built in the first place? Because this is also the paradox that Trump is blaming partners and allies for a system that actually America imposed on the world.
So this is the the truly worrying thing, I believe. But essentially, we have the system that, as you said yourself, the Americans created themselves, being now on a brink of being demolished, being finished. And we may quite easily imagine a situation in which, the other countries, other partners around the bloc, which are not particularly democratic, like China and India, in terms of trade policies, will actually be closer to us than the United States, because they will not impose tariffs against us. They would want to continue to trade freely. So we will be drifting towards a different system in which United States will remain in this kind of a self-isolation, and the rest of the world will be moving on, but in a direction which is potentially worrying.
And can be damaging to the United States.
Totally.
Right? So, this is one of the paradoxes, because, there are a lot of serious people out there, analysts and former politicians, who are saying there is a method to this chaos, let's put it mildly. That basically Trump wants to explain and show to the partners that the past is over, that America cannot be relied on as the policeman of the world, backing up alliances with real power at the same time in Europe and in Asia potentially, and that it can also no longer be the absorber of the world exports. That basically this has to end. So they're saying there's a valid case that Trump is making. The trouble with that is that his methods may produce opposite results.
Well, the system that the Americans have produced since the end of the Second World War, the Bretton Woods system, was the system which privileged around the globe the value of American currency, for example, the American dollar. Now, if the Americans are isolating themselves from the rest of the world, I think the value of American dollar may go through the window, yeah? And other nations will start thinking, well, why do we need to rely on this currency? Why?
But again, just to be the devil's advocate, my usual role, maybe Trump wants a weaker dollar, because if he gets a weaker dollar, then exports are easier for American companies, right? And imports of European or Chinese goods become more expensive in America.
It's short term, of course, but the situation in which dollar stops being the world's preferred reserve currency will affect the American economy and will affect also the credibility of America's debt. So, the consequences long term, I believe, will not be so great for the United States. That remains to be seen, because we just have so many variables here. We only know now about the Chinese response. Chinese have responded by reciprocal tariffs to the value of 34%. Yeah? We still don't know what the Europeans will actually do, whether they will go after Harley-Davidson and whiskey, or whether they will go after the big tech. Because one thing which we have not addressed here yet is that we do have a trade surplus in manufacturing goods, but we do have big trade deficit in services.
Particularly big tech companies.
Exactly.
So what does it all mean for Central Europe? Because Central Europe seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place. Traditionally, these countries are very close to America. They rely on American power for historical reasons, number of other reasons. And they want Europe and America basically to be on the same page. And now comes this. So what do you think they should be doing in terms of coordinating the European response to this?
Well, the thing is that we are not just trading partners with the United States, but also United States is our security guarantor, and we are in this part of Europe in which we need United States to stay, because we don't have a replacement. But that relationship was based both on economy, on trading, but also on trust. And that trust is now going through the window. Our economic relationship will be diverting, because we will be trading less with the United States. We will be trading more with the others. There is no other way, really. We will be thinking of how to outmaneuver the United States in that particular case. So I think that the implications for us, there are direct implications for nations like Slovakia, Czechia, Hungary, who produce a lot of cars which are subsequently being exported to the United States. So they will be hit immediately. Yeah? We not so much because we have much more Poland because Poland has much more diversified economy. It does not really produce that much on the American market. But the weakening of Transatlantic Security Alliance, which may come as a next step, unfortunately, will affect us directly.
Yes, today NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte refused to be drawn on the impact of this potential trade war with Europe on the cohesion of the alliance. But, you know, it seems that there is the same playbook as here applied by Mr. Trump. Tough on allies and soft on rivals. I mean, Russia, no tariffs.
Yeah. Well, yes, Russia had no tariffs. North Korea had no tariffs. No tariffs on Belarus.
Well, you know, North Korea is probably not exporting much.
But they are not exporting much. So there is.
But for Russia, it's different, right? Because for Russia, you know, exporting oil through all sorts of often clandestine means is its lifeline.
I think that the tariffs charter that you have shown demonstrates that Donald Trump has absolutely no strategic geopolitical perspective whatsoever.
Right.
Because of the China factor.
Right.
For
but
example.
he does have maybe a strategic. I don't know. Let's discuss it. Maybe tactical. He was very busy, but he found time to rush to the defense of Marine Le Pen, the French far-right politician, who this week was convicted by a court of embezzling European money, and which could rule her out from running in the presidential election in France. And Mr. Trump reacted to this in his usual post on Truth Social, which we can see here on the wall. It's interesting because it seems, you know, this is again the sort of leaders who are contesting the rule of law in general. They are at the same time they want immunity for themselves, but they very often are publicly threatening political opponents with judicial proceedings. You know, we remember Mr. Trump calling for Hillary Clinton to be put behind bars. But then when there is a clear violation of the law among their own political affiliates, if you will, then they say, oh, it's judicial, these are political actions by the judiciary. Does it even make sense for Trump to get involved in this?
Well, I mean, it's clearly double standards here all the way along. It's not hugely unusual in politics, but of course we do have a deeper philosophical issue here with the populist formations, with the Donald Trump being the father of them in many respects. Basically, the populist formations, they do have a skeptical attitude towards the primacy of the law on politics. They do not seem to believe that there should be anything above the politics. The will of the people, the rule of majority should be absolute, and the recourse to a constitution should not take place. Yeah, and that's what Donald Trump, Viktor Orbán, Populisim in Poland, Fico in Slovakia, Romanians, all of these people have in common. But basically, there should be this recourse to a judicial review should not take place because people decided they chose me.
Unless it's favorable to them.
Exactly, unless it's favorable to them.
Right.
Yeah.
This is very interesting because Le Pen, in this defense of herself and saying the French people are deprived of the possibility of voting for her, she doesn't even acknowledge the fact that she broke the law. And that before her, there was a number of French politicians from the so-called mainstream, like former President Sarkozy and others, who were actually prosecuted and faced jail time and had to leave politics. The difference between some of these radical right parties and, let's say, the mainstream parties is that if someone is caught red-handed from the mainstream, that person is usually dead politically, right? They withdraw, their parties will kick them out. You know, there's no place for them in politics. For the radical right, it's a badge of honor that they're persecuted.
Well, because they do not actually recognize that the law should be above politics. So that they do sell to the electorate the story that the law is created by those who are in power, it's rigged, it's corrupt, and hence, you know, being prosecuted, being found guilty,
they believe it's boosting their chances.
Exactly.
But does it actually work? You know, if you look at some of the Trump interventions in European politics, or J.D. Vance, his vice president, you know, in Greenland, you know, a huge voter backlash against the U.S. Yeah. In Germany, they backed the AfD, the radical right party. Didn't really make that such a big impact at all. In Romania, it also seems that J.D. Vance's criticism of Romania hasn't really changed the dynamics of the political spectrum. In Hungary, you know, Mr. Orbán's friendship with Mr. Trump doesn't change the fact that he's trailing behind the opposition in opinion polls. So is it even effective, this strategy of playing victim?
So I'm not sure whether there is this expression in English, but you call that kind of endorsement the kiss of death.
Yes, it is legitimate.
Right. So being endorsed by and favored by Donald Trump does not help people out in domestic politics in Europe. Quite to the contrary, which is also seen in this country. When we have a presidential election, and you know, one of the candidates of the current opposition, Mr. Zaborowski, he endorsed. He liked or he criticized Europeans over the tariff issue, and then quickly pulled out from that position, from this overt pro-US position.
Yes, because opinion polls consistently show that the majority of European opinion, if you will, is blaming Donald Trump for this problem. So sticking with Donald Trump doesn't necessarily help. Which brings me to, again, back to Mr. Orbán and his defiance of Europe, of the rules of the game, if you will. He welcomed Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel to Hungary, despite the fact that Hungary is supposed to observe the International Court of Justice arrest warrant on Netanyahu. And regardless of the merits of that warrant, which was criticized across Central Europe, to be fair, in Poland and in Czech Republic as well, you know, this is something like, you know, he's sticking it to the international community. Why is he doing this?
Well, I think in the Hungarian case is particularly radical and unwise policy because it's smaller countries which benefit more from being parts of international formats, from being parts of international institutions, because in the international format, for example, at the United Nations, the position of Hungary and Romania and, let's say, much larger Poland is pretty much the same, yeah? Or in the context of the EU, yeah? You know, so, and here Hungary, one of the founding members of the International Crime Court, is basically saying, you know, we don't abide by this ruling, we don't like it, we pull out from this format, we no longer want to be a part of that because our relationship with Mr. Netanyahu is just more valuable to us than anything else.
But that's fantasy. At the end of the day, Hungary has much more to lose alienating its European partners than sticking with Israel.
Totally, but I think that basically Viktor Orbán is, over the last few years, has become far more radical than he was before. And if we can use this kind of a, you know, colloquial language, I think he's kind of losing it, frankly.
Okay.
Until 3-4 years ago, he thought that he would persuade the center-right to move to the right. And then he lost this battle. He was chucked out of the center-right format. He became a leader of the populist formats and also...
Radical right, yes.
Radical. And since then, he keeps moving more and more to the right.
Right. Okay, Marcin, thank you very much. Thank you for watching Face to Face. See you next week and stay on with TVP Well for more news and analysis.